Well, it was interesting when we were singing those songs and his guitar going out of tune. That's not really happened here yet, I don't think. And yet, as I was sitting there, I kept wondering about our passage this morning and how actually good that tied into what's going on, because the people of God, their heart, he did not plan that either, by the way, but the people of God, their hearts had become out of tune with God's heart, and they were choosing other idols, choosing other gods to worship, and so they needed their hearts to be retuned. And we're going to encounter that very thing in our passage this morning. So I invite you to either turn your Bibles to 1 Kings 18 or follow along on the screen. The words will be printed there for you. So Ahab sent to all the Israelites and assembled the prophets at Mount Carmel. Elijah then came near to all the people and said, "How long will you go limping with two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him." The people did not answer him a word. Then Elijah said to the people, "I even only am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets number 450. Let 2 bulls be given to us. Let them choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it into pieces, and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire is indeed God." All the people answered, "Well spoken." Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose for yourselves 1 bull and prepare it first, for you are many. Then call on the name of your God, but put no fire to it." So they took the bull that was given them, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, crying, "O Baal, answer us!" But there was no voice and no answer. They limped about the altar that they had made. At noon, Elijah mocked them, saying, "Cry aloud! Surely he is a god. Either he is meditating, or he's wandered away, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened." Then they cried aloud, as was their custom. They cut themselves with swords and lances until blood gushed over them. As midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation. But there was no voice, no answer, and no response. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come closer to me." And all the people came closer to him. First, he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. Then he made a trench around the altar, large enough to contain 2 measures of seed. Next he put the wood in order, cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood. He said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." Then he said, "Do it a second time," and they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time," and they did it a third time, so that the water ran all around the altar and filled the trench also with water. At the time of the offering of oblation, the prophet Elijah came near and said, "O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your bidding. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back." Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and even licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord indeed is God. The Lord indeed is God." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Elijah is one of the most interesting characters, or at least one of the most interesting prophets that I've come across in the Bible. And this timing that this occurs is actually very fascinating. You see, Elijah had been in hiding. Ahab, this not-so-nice king, married to an even not-so-nicer queen, Jezebel. the two of them had killed all of the prophets of Israel. And so Elijah is actually off hiding during this 3-year period where Israel is experiencing a drought. And it's at that time that God says, I want you to go to my people. I want you to go and confront them. And so here we have now Elijah confronting the prophets of Baal, speaking to Ahab in this outrageous, almost outlandish competition. People are probably wondering, how is this going to turn out, especially given the circumstances? You see, and it's not that the people of God were not religious. Oh, they were really religious. But there was a problem with the religion they were practicing, actually, because what they would do is one day they would go and they would worship the Lord. The next day they would go and they'd worship Baal. Then the next day they'd go and worship Asherah. So you see, it's not that they weren't religious, it's just that they kept limping around between all these religions, trying to make sure all their bases were covered and that they would end up okay. And so it's at this very moment then that Elijah comes to them and says, you can't keep limping around between these different opinions. If God is God, then worship God. But if it's Baal, then worship Baal. But you need to pick. You need to choose. And choosing has serious implications for their lives. But you know, choosing has serious implications for our lives as well. When we choose to worship other idols, when we choose to put other gods before God, you know, when we choose other gods besides God, there are always, without exception, negative consequences for other people. Here's why. If money is the God that we choose to worship, or possessions, the accumulation of money and possessions then becomes the driving force in our life, and most often at the expense of other people. Because if all we can think about is earning more money, saving more money, spending more money, accumulating more and more possessions, it forces other people, it can force them to end up working more, putting their lives in a detrimental situation. But also, the more we are obsessed with those sorts of things, the less we are able to help other people who are in need. And so other people end up suffering because of the God we're choosing to worship. Here's another one. If sex is our God, it most certainly ends up being at the expense of somebody else. If all we think about and all we pursue is this insatiable appetite to use other people, men and women alike, physically, the other God we're worshiping has a detrimental effect on the other person, usually in humiliating and degrading that person's value. If power is the God that we choose to worship, that too has implications for other people. Because if we need to be at the top and be the one in control and have power, how many seats are at the top? What does that mean for other people who are below when we're choosing and worshiping the God of power? See, Ahab and Jezebel worshipped some of those gods. They did. Most certainly the God of power. And so they sought to use their power in abusive ways that were harmful and life-taking rather than life-giving from other people. You know, when I was younger, my parents listened to a variety of music, and one of the artists I recall them listening to quite a bit is Johnny Cash, and I'm sure you probably all are familiar with Johnny Cash's music. In fact, I really appreciate a lot of his music and still enjoy listening to it today. Johnny is one that I would say was limping around during part of his life, worshiping different gods. He grew up in a strict Southern Baptist home, served a few years in the Air Force, and after completing his time, he married his first wife, Vivian, and together they had four children together. Well, as Johnny's music career began to take off, they ended up moving to Ventura, California. And in the process of their moving there, it launched a 9-year process of Johnny actually choosing other gods to worship in his life before Yahweh. The touring schedule got to be so much for him in his pursuit of the success God that he started finding comfort in other gods. Gods of substance, drugs and alcohol. And that's what he pursued for 9 years. Were the gods of success, the gods of drugs, and the gods of alcohol. There were implications for other people. He ended up in a bad accident and ended up almost killing himself with a drug overdose. And at that point, his first wife said, "I've had enough." And she left him, taking their 4 daughters with him. There are implications. There were implications for him in the choices that he made with the gods he chose to pursue. There were implications for the people of Israel as they pursued other gods as well. And in the process here now, we find that we are confronted with this competition. Oh, and quite an interesting competition, don't you think? For Elijah, it's like being in the opponent's court. It's like he's going to the other arena. And he's surrounded here with very unfavorable odds. Could you imagine being in a stadium and you're the only one there rooting for a particular team? He's got 450 prophets of Baal surrounding him, located in this place, along with the people of Israel, and he's the only one standing firm on one side. The deck is definitely stacked against him. And then they use an offering here that's going to be more to the liking of Baal. Terms that are more in favor of Baal. And then, in fact, he even says, you get to go first. And so when they go first, they build the altar, display the wood, put the bull on it, and they start chanting for Baal to come out. Only Baal doesn't answer. And then so they cry out even more, and there's still no answer. This is where Elijah starts to have a little fun with him. It's you've probably heard this before if you've been to a sporting event. This is, you can almost hear the taunting when they do this little chant. We've got spirit. Yes, we do. We've got spirit. How about you? And you wait for them to come back and respond. He's taunting them, saying, well, Baal must have gone on vacation, or maybe Baal's relieving himself in the bathroom, or maybe he's just, who knows where he is. And then they do something that almost seems absurd. They start cutting themselves. But you see, that's what many of these other gods demanded. That you physically harm yourself, and even the Canaanite gods in particular, you got to watch out for that one because they want you to sacrifice your kids. Well, they get multiple turns. And nothing happens. Baal doesn't answer. Then Elijah's turn comes next, with 450 prophets of Baal watching, the people of Israel watching, Ahab there. Only he doesn't get as many chances. He gets one one. And here's what he does. The very first thing he does is rebuilds the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Smart man. Smart man. After rebuilding the altar that's thrown down, next he digs a trench all the way around the altar. And then what he does is he takes the wood and he meticulously places it in an order that's firm enough to hold this offering. And then he takes the bull, cuts it into pieces, puts it on top. And next he tells them, go ahead and get 4 jars of water. And I want you to pour it over top of the offering and the wood and the stones. Not only once, not twice, but 3 times. Can you just imagine the people's reaction? I would probably be gasping if I'm there. Like, what? Wait, what? We've been in this 3-year drought, and you're going to take water and waste it and just pour it over top of this bull and this wood and these stones and let it fall out to the dust and into this trench? And as they pour the water, I can hear it splashing off the bull, splashing onto the ground and dripping, drip, 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 into the trench. And then he does something significant, even more significant after that. During the offering of oblation, that's another way of saying that is during the offering of loyalty. The offering of loyalty. He offers a prayer to God. And here's what he prays. Answer me, O Lord. Answer me so that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. He prays something that's not selfish, but he prays a prayer that's life-giving. Because he wants them to make the right choice. Expressing his loyalty and his allegiance during a time of day they couldn't ignore. This was more than just something nationalistic that was going on. And yet he pulls out all the nationalistic stops there could be. 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Israel. And then refers to God as the God of the ancestors of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then at a time of prayer, during the day they would have known what it was, a prayer of loyalty. And God did not disappoint. This fire comes down and consumes the offering, the wood, the stones, the dust, and licks up all the water in the trench. God's presence was revealed in this burning ring of fire. You know, June Carter Cash wrote a song about a burning ring of fire. Johnny sang it. And it was written about the love, actually, that they shared together. And as I thought about that song and this image of a ring of fire burning, and it may sound kind of quirky, but it's really not, because I've seriously wondered if that's a way in which God revealed God's presence to Johnny, was through June. To call him back, giving him a second chance in life. Because obviously the people of Israel chose wrong repeatedly. They kept choosing other gods. They kept choosing other idols to worship. Idols who can't even hear. If you can't hear, how can you respond? They're just things. And you look at the history of Johnny's life. She loved him unconditionally and helped him by walking alongside of him to help him to choose God. And you know, when the altar in his life was rebuilt, his heart turned back to God, and the other idols that once had a stronghold in his life no longer had a definitive power in his life any longer. They didn't. What altars in your life need to come down? What altar needs to be rebuilt? Some I know what you're struggling with, some I don't. But there are ways I believe we all limp back and forth. And it can be scary letting go of those other gods and those other idols, thinking that they have power when they really don't. It can seem overwhelming, and I can't even imagine being in Elijah's shoes, sandals, whatever you want to call it. I can't imagine being in his position, being surrounded by 450 other prophets who are saying something completely, utterly, totally the opposite of what he's saying, and being the only one there. Well, yes, I can. But how overwhelming that must have been. And yet he chose and was encouraging the people to choose God. Because in choosing God, we have victory and can defeat those other idols, those other gods, and smash whatever stronghold we may think that they have. So I want to encourage all of us this week to spend time in prayer and ask God, God, what is it that I'm putting before you? What are the other idols or gods in my life that need to be destroyed? God's presence will be revealed. I believe that with all of my heart. When we pray and we ask God, it might not be in a burning ring of fire, but God's presence will be revealed in one way, shape, or form. Are we willing to rebuild the altar? An altar, one altar, to the one and only God? Providing a place for God's presence to come and to reside? Are we really willing? You see, there's a cost. There's a cost involved. God's people were given multiple chances. We're people who are given multiple chances. And I pray that with the people of Israel, we too will declare firmly and definitively, the Lord is God indeed. The Lord indeed is God. Would you pray with me?